Thank you, Alberto Ferreras, for coming on. Writer, director, photographer. I mean, what do tell everybody what the projects you've been involved in, created, and then we can get started.
Well, the in order of nothing, in order of nothing. I mean, some people know me as a writer because in 2009, I, 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 a novel that I wrote got published. It's called B as in Beauty, and anyone who, I mean, thank God, like I've never met anyone who didn't like it. I swear to God. I mean, if somebody didn't like it, they didn't tell me. Thank God.
Yeah.
But so I'm a novelist, and I studied television. So some people know me as a film director, producer, and I created a show for HBO called Habla that I'm sure maybe you've heard about.
Well, not a show. I mean, it's been like you said, it's been going on for 2000 since 2003,
2003.
and
It's a
my
series.
wife and my wife and I have HBO Max, so we've been check. We've been binge watching it this whole week. And like I told you, I'm sorry that I missed it the first time around. I guess I remember hearing about it, but I wasn't into my Latino phase. I was a young 20-something, late teens. So I hadn't connected with my Latino-ness. And I felt like now I'm 36. I'm ready mentally, spiritually, culturally, more self-aware of who I am and where I come from to enjoy Habla.
Uh, it's profound. I mean, sometimes it's very funny. There's a little chancleta jokes, but sometimes
Very
we touch
funny.
upon something that is like, wait, my entire life is flashing before my eyes. So there's that. Some it sounds like I'm a little bit of a creative schizophrenic type because I would jump between one thing and another. But I wrote a screenplay for a feature that went to Sundance, but it didn't get released in the U.S., which
What
is
was the name
Querido a
of
la
it?
Música. That if you're Colombian, what's your ancestry? Your
My
background?
mom was born in Honduras, and my dad is Puerto Rican, born in Chicago.
Oh, that's a good mix.
Is it?
It's a really good mix. Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Um,
I got the Honduran jersey on, and I got the Marlena. You know Marlena, right? She sent this to me
of
from
course.
Puerto Rico.
Oh man, did she move there? Like for good?
No,
I
she's just always there. Like 3, 4. Her mom's lives down there, so she's always going down there to check on her mom.
the La Bruja. I see her in the island all the time now.
Yeah, she was
And
with
like maybe
Oscar this past couple weeks ago, right? She was with Oscar Lopez doing something. He's doing
exactly.
something for PBS or something.
He would. I actually, I will take credit for this. She was sweet, and she posted on social media that I made the introduction. I know these two very cool guys, Craig Martin and Earl Bridges, I think is his last name, and they have a show on PBS called The Good Road, and they were going to Puerto Rico, and they wanted me to talk about like, and I'm like, no, dude, you need some hardcore Boricua, like the real thing. I have opinions, I have ideas, but I'm going to be repeating what my friends have told me
Ah,
about Puerto Rico and the New Yorican experience. So I said you have to talk to La Bruja, and I also wanted to connect them with Soldanela Rivera. Pero Soldanela, I don't know what she's up to. I
she's been
love
on the
her,
show. She's been on
and
your
I
show.
think that she should have been on the show as well. So because they know, and Soldanela did an amazing job, with the people who were with the refugees of Huracan Maria, the ones that ended up in New York. She did a lot of oral history of that experience,
And then
and of course, her podcast.
there, Frances Montaner Negron, who was also who's also been on the show. She came out with that currency. What was it? A valori cambio. Really trying to. What was it? I mean, it's kind of like she kind of foresaw this whole what is not they're not crypto, but the non fungible FT some currency. There's currencies that are trying to replace fiat currency, right?
Uh,
And so she came out with Valori Cambio with these bills that had like famous, uh, or maybe not so famous heroes from the Puerto Rican past that you can go to an ATM and you could exchange community service for money. How great is that?
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. No, no,
Uh,
no. These are like pretty amazing ladies.
yeah.
We,
It's an honor and a pleasure to have you on. I mean, to be honest, I when I first was bringing you on, um, I don't know how we started following each other, how I started following you on Instagram, but when the pandemic started, you started taking these photos of pigeons. And in the beginning, they were rough, right? You know, you're trying to capture motion, trying to capture them and, you know, doing certain things. And now they're so beautiful. Are you like, what? Are you like trying to be the world's, is that the window you take them from?
That's my window. Yeah, yeah.
That's the
If
famous
you give me
window?
a second, I could wait a second. Let me see if I can do this. Ay, coño. I just came from my chiropractor. Okay, so this is gonna take like a couple of minutes, but bear with us.
Yeah.
Continue. How about the
Uh,
pigeon?
Yeah. What's that building across the street? That big shiny building.
That that is I'm lucky. I moved to this neighborhood. I'm in the border between the West Village, Chelsea, and the Meatpacking District. So, and they built this thing across the street from me in 2008. I'm not crazy about it, but in the afternoons, it reflects the sun.
Right. It's beautiful.
Okay, so there you go. That's one right there. Oh, that's two right there. Whoa, we got three right there.
Let me ask you: do you recognize regulars at your windowsill?
I definitely there's a guy. I think he's a guy because they told me that the ladies are a little smaller and they're a little bit more slender, and the guys are more like. So there's a big guy who's very territorial, and he gets, if anybody tries to come over when he's around, he's like, no, that's my window and those are my seats. So I think I know him. But I also really try not to turn my window into an Alfred Hitchcock movie. It's very easy. Yeah. And when I see more than four, like, kind of waiting for me, I'm like, okay, no.
No, but birds are so calming, right? I mean, when I was a kid, I'm into birds still. I mean, whenever you were into it as a kid, it never really leaves you, right? I mean, when I was a kid, I was so into birds. I caught every bird I could in my neighborhood. I caught robins, sparrows, doves, blackbirds. I caught everything I could, because we were, we didn't have money for parakeets and shit like that, so I had to catch my own. And they're just so, I don't know, what is it about bird? Why did you start taking these photographs of birds, of pigeons specifically? Which is a very city bird, right?
Oh yes, and apparently nobody likes them. I'm like, well,
I love them. People think they're flying rats. People whenever they're around too many pigeons, they get nervous. I'm like, relax, it's just birds.
Beautiful. I think, yeah, they just have some people don't know shit. I mean, just to see them in action, to see those wings.
Yeah,
and when
exactly.
you start taking pictures of them, it's like, oh my God, this is like, you understand why Leonardo da Vinci was obsessed with them and was trying to design, wings for a human.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is the pandemic. I mean, I live by myself, which is a blessing according to people who don't. But I spent a lot of time by myself. I started noticing that the sparrows in my neighborhood, they were very hungry. So I would go outside to have coffee and a bagel, whatever. And those sparrows, they were like snatching food off my hand, literally. So my first connection with the birds was with these little robins, whatever you call them, finches, I think they call them in New York. And so that was it. I would go outside, I would feed those, and they would take food off my hand. So I made some slow motion videos with my iPhone. And then I don't know exactly how I started fantasizing that maybe they would come upstairs, but of course, all the
for tea or what? For coffee?
Well, the bird lovers, they when they saw me giving them little pieces of croissant, they freaked out. It's like, don't give them bread. Yeah, they're gonna explode, and it's gonna
make
be
them. The yeast or something, right? Or what is it?
This I guess carbs are bad for everybody. So I started buying raw, unsalted sunflower seeds. And I'm like, okay, let's try with this. But actually the ones that show up at my window were the pigeons. And I'm like, years ago, they arrested a pigeon lady who she used to hang out in the park across the street from me. And when they were taking her away, they're like, don't you see that you're feeding the rats? And she said, well, the rats need to be fed as well. And so I feel a little bit like her. I'm like, okay, so some people don't like the pigeons, but they need to eat.
Yeah.
And because there's less people in the street, there's less garbage for them to nibble on.
Wow.
So, well, we have
some cities pass laws, right, where you can't feed the pigeons because they shit over everything, right? So the less you feed them, the less shit there's going to be on statues and whatever.
Exactly. But I don't think that they're gonna go away. And I'm trying to be very mindful. Again, I'm not turning my window into like a bird feeding frenzy. Um, but man, yeah, I mean they're my pets. I don't have a dog. I don't have a boyfriend. So the only people who show up sometimes is the pigeons. So it's nice to do something for them. And the best thing. And this is gonna sound like we're crazy people, but they managed to communicate, and that's what blew me away. Because one day I was just sitting here and I'm like, I'm not gonna feed these guys. I'm just gonna work on my stuff. And Pigeon, she was standing outside and looking at me. And when I turned and look at her, she started going like this. And she would like start like peeking from the spot where I put the food, but there was nothing. So she was telling me, dude, I'm here to eat. What up? And so I was like, I just got the message and I
No,
had to
I mean
feed.
birds are super smart. I mean, even not just the parrots. I mean, crows can count. They can fish. They have funerals for their dead. They when there's a dead crow, they like hump the dead crow, and that's how they mourn the passing. I wanted to ask you about Habla because like when I'm watching, I started with the celebrity Hablas, right? Just to kind of as an introduction, I know these people. Okay, you can put into context this whole show because you know the people, right? Maybe that's a coward's way of going towards an artistic project. Go towards what you know, right? Um, but the other episodes, right, with I guess normal people, they're far from normal. Are way more entertaining, right? Funnier, interesting, wild stories. Like just every, I watched them all, right? And just wild stories, wild. Everybody's a character, and I love the fact that you pull. Um, there's just a wide gamut of Latino-ness in there, right? There's the quintessential Puerto Rican man, quintessential Puerto Rican woman, and then the people who are like Colombian, Venezuelan, and Puerto Rican, but they don't look like any Puerto Rican or sound like any Puerto Rican I've ever seen, and their stories are, or the what was it Juminicana,
Oh my
pe-
God, Rachel, yes.
people with all these mixes, and like I was telling you on IG on our DM, it's making me mourn the Latino ness that I didn't grow up having, because I have my own, right? I have my own through my grandma and my mom and my dad and stuff like that. But um, maybe it's just FOMO. Maybe I'm realizing that Latino-ness is so wide, and even though I have my little Honduran-ness and my little Puerto Rican-ness, man, I wish I had some of that Colombian, or I wish I had some of that Chilean. You know what I mean?
Well, you have it. It's yours.
That's
It's
true.
yours.
That's
It's
true.
absolutely, it belongs to everybody. Um, it's interesting things that I've learned doing Habla. Actually, in Habla Más, which we did in Chicago, we had this Colombian girl. She looks like a model, Joana Londoño, I think is her last name. And she said the most profound thing. She said, when I was in Colombia, I didn't know anything about other Colombians. Like I think she was from Medellin. She's
Oh
like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
only
yeah.
knew people from Medellin, didn't know anything from anybody else. And it's now in the States that I have become aware of all the things I had in common and how different we are at the same time. So she became more Colombian here. Um, this can get really profound
No, it's very profound.
because the experience of Habla for me has been a profound experience. I mean, we started doing Habla because and when I say we, there's a lot of amazing people that have helped me like make Habla. The first one would be Trina Verduzco, who was I hired her to work with me at HBO, and after she left the company, she became the executive producer of the series. Elaine Brown, who greenlit it, Chris Spencer, who was my boss, who was not even a Latino, and he understood that it was important for us to do it. And of course, Lucinda Martinez, who throughout the years, and Jessica Vargas maintained, who continue doing Habla because they thought that it was a project that shouldn't die. But anyway, after all this like name calling, Chrissy Hines as well, the uh, the reason why we started doing Habla is because um, I worked my first job when I moved to New York. I was 24, was with MTV, and then I moved
Where'd
to
you grow up?
HBO. I grew up in Venezuela,
Okay.
and in Venezuela, it's the same thing as in Mexico. you would see when you were watching television, everybody was white and blue-eyed and spoke with an accent. There was this whole thing about, and only the brown people played. They play the maid. They would play. There's an actress I'm obsessed with her. God bless her, Chumiko Romero. I don't know if there's any Venezuelan like from the old days. They will go, Chumiko Romero, of course. Chumiko always played the prostitute or the maid because she was dark skinned.
Yeah.
Pero the las rubias, all the blondes would be the leading lady, and it only got worse through the 80s and 90s, and I thought it was incredibly unfair. So when I come to the States, not only is the same situation, but in the States they were importing these novelas from Mexico and Argentina,
Right.
and Venezuela, and that's what U.S. Latinos were watching. So there were no U.S. Latino stories in the media, and I'm sorry to say, Telemundo Univision. I'm sure that some people were trying, but and Spanglish, you couldn't be on camera in those networks if you didn't speak perfect Spanish.
Right.
What the fuck is perfect Spanish?
Right.
If you-
No, and then they had shows from like I remember my grandma would watch shows from like Brazil, even like Portuguese novelas.
exactly.
And I don't know if you saw. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the Jenny Rivera Telemundo series. Has 91 episodes.
I have not, but I've heard like amazing things about it.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about Jenny. All I knew is that she was, she sang songs and she died in 2012, and that they thought that the narcos, took her plane down. That's all I knew about her. And so me and my wife started watching it, and I didn't watch them all. She watched them all. She's a huge Selena fan now. She plays is Jenny Rivera, so she's 33, right? And what the show does well is it captures Latino American life in a novela. Like, they're talking Spanglish, very like not forced, not like crowbarred in. It's a really good novela, like a very modern.
And that is hard to capture.
Yes,
because it's not. In order for people to speak Spanish, and that was something we tried really hard with Habla, is not to bring anyone who would like casually like squeeze a word here and there to make it sound like street smart. Or
you see that a lot in like fiction too, right?
Oh my God, it's so obvious.
My abuela. That's the only word they say.
Exactly, my abuela. There's a when we were doing that, we were kind of like obsessed with that, and we would always test people before they went in the show because I always say, and please don't anyone get offended, Dominicans only pronounce the S, when they're in front of a camera or in front of a microphone. All of a sudden, todas las palabras terminan con S. I'm like, dude, you didn't talk like that when you were, outside of the studio. What the hell? And I really, really wanted to capture that because I felt like when we see people the way we are talking, the way we talk, it just makes you feel like there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
And when you don't see yourself on the screen, you grow up thinking that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Because you're out of the picture for some reason, right?
Exactly.
It's was that an Habla? I must have been an Habla where that kid who his name was Jesus, but all of a sudden they start calling him Jesse.
Jesse. That's Habla, Texas, yeah.
They start calling him Jesse.
And all of a sudden you don't know if you know these people or not because they were talking to you. So you're like, did I meet him in a party or did I watch that on TV? It was Habla.
Yeah, I had Dr. Kim Patowski, who's a linguist at UIC. She was on the show, and she talked about how she's doing these studies on Puerto Ricans and Mexicans and Mexicans in Chicago. And so her study shows that Puerto Ricans are super insecure about their Spanish, especially when they're around Mexicans or people who speak the standard Spanish, quote unquote, right? So Puerto Ricans, when they go around Mexicans, they'll speak more like Mexicans. But when Mexicans go around Puerto Ricans, they stick to their Mexican Spanish because it's understood that the Mexican Spanish is better, quote unquote, than Puerto Rican Spanish. So I wonder if you're talking about that, where you bring out a Dominican, and all of a sudden they start pronouncing their S's and their L's and everything.
Exactly. Well, the funny thing, if you want to hear my personal story with accents, is that I was born in Spain and I moved to Venezuela when I was 4 years old.
So you're like one of these people that were in Habla, right? They all have these interesting, fascinating backgrounds.
There's a weird story. What's up with that guy? Pero, so my family moved to Venezuela when I was 4. And at the time, and still today, but less because tragically Venezuela has gone through so much tragedy. Venezuela, wealthy, very wealthy country, attracted a lot of immigrants from all over the place,
Right.
and I grew up surrounded by kids who were children of Croatians and Italians and Portuguese and Spaniards, because a lot of people, especially after the war, they moved to Venezuela, to get a better future, because there were opportunities.
And
And
Venezuela was booming, like especially in the before the '90s. Before, I'm for the Bolivarian Revolution. I'm not for Chavismo, but Venezuela was booming before Chavez, right?
absolutely, and I understand your position, and it's like heartbreaking because I also thought it was going to be a good thing, and
Right.
then like
Like in
anyway,
Cuba, right? Like same thing in Cuba.
exactly. And so the yeah, it's been devastating. But Venezuela, very wealthy country, a lot of people from the places. Being from Spain was the super of your building was from Spain, Gallego, and the super from my building and the super of all the buildings. And the shoemakers were Italian, and the bakers were Portuguese. And there was a little bit of a ladder, and the kind of like the worst thing that you could be was Portuguese. That was like, oh, you stank. It was like a really, it was not nice. Now that I
Wow.
think about it, I've written a little bit about it because one of my biggest fears when I was growing up is that people might think that I was Portuguese, because being Spanish was bad enough. Don't get me wrong. If you're a Gallego, you were dumb, and that's what they call you. You're Spanish, you're Gallego, and you're dumb, and you have bad taste, and you're a blue collar worker, and so in order to for a child to reconcile this pressure, you just go undercover. So I got rid of my accent, and if anybody asks me where I was from, I'm like, I'm from Venezuela. That's it.
Yeah.
So when I moved to New York, I'm like, I don't have to hide anymore. I can tell people, that I'm from Spain. So I went to my first party in New York, and this guy came over and he's like, "Oh, I hear an accent. Where are you from?" And I'm like, "I am from Spain." And he said, "Yeah, really. All Puerto Ricans claim to be Spaniards." And I went like, "Fuck you!"
Yeah.
And not because you're mistaking me with a Puerto Rican, just because you think that you can make fun of someone who grows under the pressure of having to hide where they're from. So if you think I'm a Puerto Rican, I'm a Puerto Rican motherfucker, and what the fuck is wrong with that? So
No,
that was my attitude.
no, and he's just insecure, right? Because when he thought you were Puerto Rican, you speak Spanish, right? He can tell you speak Spanish, and then he thinks, oh, you're Puerto Rican, and you say I'm from Spain. He's impressed by that, and to show it, he's like, no, like you're just Puerto Rican.
You're
Like
Puerto
he
Rican.
wishes he could say that, right? He wishes he could say that.
It's whatever it was. It bothered me so much that I said two things, and I'm never gonna say that to anyone who thinks it's better, because it's not better to be from
Right,
anywhere.
right,
You're better if you're a good person. You're bad if you're a bad person. You
right,
can be born in Luxembourg and you can be an asshole.
right.
Uh, we should get T-shirts that say that, born in Luxembourg and yet an asshole, or in Monaco. You can be from anywhere and still be an idiot.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I empathize. I That made me feel closer to the Latino community in New York, because I felt like I had been through that struggle when I was a child. So I could understand, the shame of speaking bad Spanish, or a different Spanish,
Yeah.
and to be to be perceived a certain way because of your accent, or because of your last name, or because of whatever. So I think that's when I started. I got in that groove, and there were moments in my career that I could have gone kind of like more general market, but I felt like if I didn't do what I was doing, who was going to do it?
Yeah.
And so, I keep feeling like my mission, and I could be wrong about it, other than feeding the pigeons, is to bridge cultures, and to hopefully help, people understand each other
I mean, that's
and
so
ourselves.
powerful. I mean, I get, postmodernism and deconstruction and, you know, deconstructing everything, deconstructing Puerto Ricanness and, oh, what kind of Puerto Rican or what kind of blah, blah, blah. Identity is so important, right? I get it. Identity is, probably the most important, right? But also, you can't lose the idea of solidarity, that we're all human, right? That we're all just, like when astronauts come, go to space, they say, "Oh, there's my there's my house, and then they pass. Was that on Habla too? And then they
That's in
pass.
Habla.
A couple of minutes later, the Russian guy points and that's my house, and they're all pointing down. Everybody's pointing down. We're all from this planet. I mean, yeah, there's so many lines in Habla that so many.
You're making me so happy. So Leah O'Brien said she's in that show, and I remember she was watching it, and she turned around, she goes like, "Well, who knew that the astronaut was gonna get like the best soundbite?"
Yeah.
Because you're watching these guys super like super low key. What's his name? Oh gosh, what's his name? Amazing guy, and then he tells you that little story about the fingers pointing at the Earth from space, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm crying, and I don't know why. He's from Costa Rica. Chang is his name. Garcia Chang, Diaz Chang. Anyway, welcome to us. I'm so happy that you're quoting out. Like, you have no idea.
What happens with me is maybe I don't cry. It's not with my wife next to me, but I cry in the bathroom. But what happens to me is my heart gets a flutter, right? And my heart kept doing that throughout Habla, right? All the shows, like people kept saying, they would tell stories, or they were so funny, or the way they spoke was so just so unique and powerful and dynamic. It was beautiful. And I was telling you, the lines and lessons. Describe what lessons is. To me, it's like little skits, beautifully shot, incredibly written. The lines and lessons, I'm like, oh, truth, fact bomb right here, 100%. Like, and you're talking. I mean, we'll talk about it, but explain what lessons is.
What the lessons are. Okay, so this is where it all started. As I mentioned earlier, I wrote a novel and it got published, but it took 5 years for that book to go from a manuscript to being available in the stores.
What's that wait like? I mean, because I'm somebody who's about to start writing my first book, and maybe because I'm a millennial, and so it has to be now, or else it's not worth it. What was that wait like?
I mean, it's the most painful thing in the universe when you're just waiting for the freaking thing, and you send the manuscript, and it comes back, and you send it again, and it comes back again, and then around the same time, Dynamo, the guys who do Narcos, they hired me to adapt this Colombian book called Que Viva la Música. So I did the screenplay, and it took also 5 or 6 years for the movie to premiere, and it went to Sundance, which was amazing. Pero, I'm no spring chicken myself, and I'm thinking, wow, if every time I do something big, it takes 5-6 years, right. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna have like nothing. I mean, I have so many things that I want to say.
Right.
And I kept having these like lines in my head that I wanted to write. I'm like, okay, this would make a great scene, but then I have to write a whole feature around it. Then I have to try to get that thing produced just so people can see through one good scene. What the fuck? I said, no, I'm just going to write that scene as if it was a movie. Yeah. And this is when I get a little like academic. I am convinced that the human species is story literate. I think that we have a vocabulary of stories. That we know the evil stepmother is sitting there like the L, and and the what abusive father is sitting there like the T, and we can cook with all these things. We don't have to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We can put the T and the R, and we know exactly what I'm trying to say. So that's what I try to do with lessons. I'm like, people are gonna understand, even if there's no context to the scene, that this is. And hopefully they will have the same catharsis that you have, when you watch a 2-hour movie without context and without. I mean, it should be self-contained. And so I did first lesson number 1, which is super. It's just one take with Shirley Rumier and Francisco Solorzano, which I love. And I'm like, let's do this and let's make it a challenge. It's always going to be only one rehearsal. It's going to be shot in 4 hours, always only in 4 hours. And we're going to do it in my apartment, which, as you can see, is not that big. And we started, I started working with a really wonderful DP and friend who is Alex Tikic, Croatian,
beautifully shot.
And it's so simple. And we're all going to be black and white, because you know what happens in black and white? Less distractions. You pay more attention to that's what I think happens.
Mike Tyson, he has a podcast, Hotboxing with Mike Tyson. And now it's got all this high production value. But when he first came out with it, it came out in black and white. He would have the episodes in black and white, and I thought that was brilliant because it's just so it makes you focus on the people's facial expressions and what they're saying, and that's it. That's all you need to focus on.
Exactly. Like right now, if I have a zit, yeah, probably everybody's staring at it. I'm like, in black and white, it looks like a beauty mark. Who knows?
What's the woman? I'm calling her the main actress. I mean, to me, she's the main actress. She's amazing.
Olga Merediz.
Olga Meris.
Olga Merediz. She's the grandmother in the Heights. She's Abuela Claudia.
Wow.
She's the HR woman.
Just the lines. I mean, you make her say when she's in bed. I don't know if I'm giving these aren't spoiler alerts, but the other thing is just before I say what I'm about to say, like you're talking about flash fiction now we call it, right? Where maybe it's because of the way we live. Nobody has time to read novels anymore. Even us readers, we don't have time to read the way we want to, right? I finally just downloaded Audible, and I'm listening to stuff on Audible. I'm getting used to it. I just miss reading a book, But yeah, so these are little vignettes, I guess you can call them, right? And the line that you make her say, what is it in lesson number 4, where they're in bed and they just had sex, when she's with that guy, I guess they just hooked up.
That's Suzanne. You're talking about Suzanne Didona. She's amazing.
She's amazing, yeah. She goes, you like to say that you work hard and you drink hard, but what you do is you work hard and play hard. But what you do is you work hard and drink hard, and there's nothing fun about it. Ooh,
there's nothing playful about that.
Yeah.
No, because it has become such a freaking cliche. That actress, the actress that you're talking about, her name is Suzanne Didona. She's amazing. She's a stage actress in New York City. I saw her in a production of The Last Days of Judas Iscariot, by Stephen Adly Guirgis, which is, I have to say, one of my favorite plays ever, and it's one of my favorite theater experiences ever, because that thing is like 4 hours long, and I was sitting on the edge of my seat.
I've heard of it. What is it about? They're in purgatory, and they're considering to send Judas out of hell because on kind of like good behavior. So it's a reflection on everything that happens between Judas and Jesus Christ, and how Jesus lets Judas down. It's weird. I mean, I've heard this theory that this is getting in the weeds, but brought up Judas Iscariot. Like, I heard this theory that Jesus told Judas to betray him, that Judas was his most trusted person, and he told him the plan, because Jesus is like, I need to die in order for this to work. I need to die and come back in order for this to work. So he told Judas to betray him. Judas did not betray him out of money or anything. Because he betrayed him for some money, but Judas was rich, so he didn't even need the money. That's the theory I heard.
That is it's definitely, it's a theme in literature. This guy I worship, Jorge Luis Borges, is this Argentinian writer that people think is too old. I think Borges for me is like a prophet. He's not even a writer, and he has an essay called Three Versions of Judas, and he brings that up. He's like, this guy has kind of like he's the villain, and he accepts to be a villain for the rest of history. He takes on that role. He knows that he will be pooped on, for forever and ever, and so he deserves a lot of respect for that. Yes, yeah, I'm with you.
And then in 6, you have I guess they're drag queens, and it's after the show, and they're looking in the mirror, and I guess she's going after, or he is going after, this idea of manifesting. If only I had wanted it enough. Oh, he's just like, well, fuck. If only I would have known that, I would have had, so many shows by now and so many awards by now if I just wanted it enough. How stupid. Oh, I loved it, because people are always talking to me about the secret in manifesting, and you got to want it. And, it fucking pisses me off, man.
Because it's bullshit. Yeah. Because it is fucking bullshit. He's like, you're not a millionaire. You didn't want it hard enough, because anybody can be a millionaire. No, it's not true. It is absolutely not. It's certifiably false. But I don't want to poop on anyone who like is like a positive thinker. But that's how I feel about it. And that actress who's fabulous, her name is Barbara Herr. And when I first moved to New York in the early 90s, she was a regular in a club called La Escuelita. I don't think you ever went there. You're too straight for that, aren't you? You're like, I got that place.
No, I'm from Chicago, so some of the best times I've ever had were in Boys Town, right? But people would get mad at me because I guess I'm a good-looking dude,
I'm
and so
just
like
here
when they see I'm not on the menu, they get mad. They're like, "Why the fuck did you come here anyway?" I'm like, "Cause you guys play good music and you guys love to dance. Why can't I come here?"
Drinks are good, and
Yeah.
and the girls, when they realize that you're the only straight guy in the bar, they're all over you.
Right, because there's a lot of tons of straight girls go to gay bars, right?
Oh, absolutely, too many, if you ask me. But but so I saw Barb. There was a club in New York called La Escuelita, and I love that place. It was a dark basement. They would frisk you at the door because they had a couple of incidents with knives and such. And the bathroom was such a mess that there were always 2 inches of water on the floor. So if you needed to pee, you had to kind of
I can just hear it.
It was amazing, and it was a real playground for trans people when there was nowhere for them to go. And they would put in a show, and it was a very Latin club. It was the only place that I knew. I mean, there was the only place in Manhattan, kind of like downtown, where you could dance salsa with another guy. Wow. Which is a tragic thing because I grew up. I can dance salsa, pero I was raised to lead. And the guys that I like, they wanted to lead, and I'm like, you just can't turn. You're like, man, we're both leaders. Ugh. Right. Anyway, so La Escuelita was a fabulous place. I saw Barbara her in La Escuelita in the 90s, and I said to myself, sooner or later I'm going to work with her because she's just too good, too smart. There's something there. And she was in Habla Men. I don't know if you remember her. She's the one who tells the story about transitioning, and she's also in lesson number 6. And I'll work with her any chance I get. I had another script, another lesson to shoot, but then with COVID, it went to hold. And Suzanne, who's the one that I saw in the Judas play, another amazing actress, and another 2 more Latina actresses that I work with that I worship, Shirley Rumier. Who's married to Armando Riesco, who you probably know. Do you? You do? You don't?
I'm not good Armando, with names. You got to...
They're both actors. They're these like the most gorgeous like couple of Latino actors in the universe.
I got to know them then.
Shirley is a Colombian, Puerto Rican. She grew up in Hell's Kitchen. And Armando is Cuban, Puerto Rican. He's very blanco. Armando, you look at him and you think he's like from somewhere Connecticut, and he's super boricua. And
there's a lot of people like that in Habla. Like there's so many people in Habla that like I would have bet $1 million they were their name was Rick Scott or some shit, and then they speak the best Spanish I've ever heard in my life, with Venezuelan accents and Colombian accents and Puerto Rican accents.
Yes, pero bueno, so then I have. Do you remember the lesson about the HR meeting?
Oh yeah, I was gonna get to that, because you seem to be making a comment on, I guess the Me Too. Just that there are certain things that are Me Too, and there are certain things that are just a misunderstanding between people.
It is the danger. So for people who have not, first I think we need to make a little pause and tell people who are watching this, you have to go on YouTube and you have to look up Alberto Ferreras The Lessons, and you're gonna find like 7 short films. There's going to be a new one soon, which is the one that HBO acquired that I think now I can put it up on YouTube. Anyway, these are a bunch of short films that are really cute and you will get a kick out of them. Yeah. Going back. So one of these lessons, they're numbered, by the way, they don't have titles. They're number 1, number 2, right. Number 3. Actually, 3 is not produced yet. So number 9 is about this couple that ends up in the Human Resources office because at the Christmas party, there was something going on. And actually, I was very careful with that. First of all, it's very funny. It's a little risque.
Super funny.
But I'm very concerned that corporate policy is dictating human behavior. And for those of us who at some point work in a corporation, I spent about 20 years of my life working for a corporation, and you understand that things have to be a certain way to avoid human problems, but we have to remember that we're humans,
Right.
and then when people, especially in media companies, people work 12, 14 hours a day and they don't have a life, sooner or later, you're gonna break
Yeah,
somehow.
she goes, I don't need a boyfriend. I have a life. And she and the human resources person goes to her life like, you only have an hour a day to have a life.
Exactly, where the hell do you have that life,
Yeah.
especially with all the demands that we're putting on ourselves, going back to what you were saying at the beginning.
And
you
they're
know
kind of like children because like the human resources person makes them kind of realize that, or it makes the audience maybe think, or it suggests that they actually like each other, but they're just being kids and they don't know how to like initiate this relationship.
because it's becoming more and more difficult, and that
Right.
is one thing that I am very afraid of. That, I mean, I don't know if you've been following the issue, and we're not going to turn this into a political thing because then
Right.
somebody's going to come out and insult us, but the Cuomo thing
Oh
issue
yeah.
in New York.
Yeah.
And me, of course, I don't condone anyone's behavior, but like, dude, somebody, gave me a hug and I'm gonna, scream bloody murder. He held me a little too long. I'm like, that is a little subjective.
Yeah.
Kiss me on the cheek. Well, a lot of people kiss on the cheek. I mean, in Venezuela, I'm the only one who doesn't kiss in the cheek anymore because I've been in New York for 30 years.
Wow.
I know. In Spain, women, I mean, it's hysterical. Like when I go to Spain to visit my sister and someone introduces me to a woman, she will yank me over and give me a kiss on the cheek, even if I don't want to,
Yeah.
because that's culturally acceptable. Um, I'm afraid of the dehumanizing humanity
Wait,
because it's a corporate liability,
you
you
see it in
know.
Japan. I say that we're becoming Japan, right? They say Japan's 20 years ahead of America. And in Japan, the men and women, especially young men and women, they don't go in the same circles anymore. They never interact. They don't know how to talk. So that now there's like what, 40% of Japanese adult men are virgins, right? Because then they just don't know how to initiate with the opposite sex, how to
This
talk.
And you know something, if sex was a bad thing, God would have come up with a different way for humanity to do
Exactly.
things. I say you can do it by mail. It's super easy. Just put this thing in this envelope and you send it over, and you never have. No, sex is, and there's a healing quality to the sexual experience and touch. In number two, they talk a little bit about it. I have Suzanne in that one again, Suzanne Didona, and David Fraioli, and they talk about it's the story of this woman who rightfully so, has become very guarded when it
Oh, the
comes to
therapist, right?
relationships. And he's like, "You need to get laid," and she's like, "No, I don't need to get laid." It's like, we all need to get laid. It's
Yeah.
not you in particular; it's humanity. I mean, at a certain age, I think we all need that.
And
I
in
think.
the then there's what is it, lesson 9 with the two gay men, and they're, that one's all about like you say you want something, but it's not. You're not saying what you really want. You're just saying what you think people want you to say. Like because like I'm not a fucking jackhammer. He's like, let me go to your profile. You say you're a fucking jackhammer.
And that's lesson 8. That's John David West and David Fraioli, and you're gonna see that some of the actors, so actually some of the characters repeat. They
Yeah.
go from one story to another one, um, and yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a story about two gay guys who are in bed who they they're trying to live up to the other one's expectations, which is terribly dangerous. And I think that I thought that happened more with like straight couples than with gay couples, but it now has to this whole like top or like everything in life is forcing us to choose.
Yeah.
Like Trump or Biden, left or right. It's like top or bottom. I'm like,
Your brand.
what?
Your
Well,
brand.
relax. Is there a middle road here where I can like try something one day and something different the other? Um, so these guys are trying to live up to each other's expectations, and what's happening in the gay world is that that if I admit or I confess or I embrace bottomness, then I will expect from anyone to come in like with an erection and
Yeah.
like, what the fuck is this? Can we just like relax, get to
Right.
know each other, and figure out what we want to do? I think sex should be a conversation
For sure. I mean, I thought
somehow.
sex is a conversation, but a
Sex is
conversation
a
before that
conversation.
conversation.
Yeah, but when you're in bed, you're like, I'm not gonna do something that you don't want, and I should
Right.
be figuring out what you want me to do.
Right.
And I think that's why I see where I see a conversation, not the verbal conversation, but a body thing.
And as soon as they're both present with each other in that moment, then they start to connect. He says, "Oh, I play the accordion," and he goes, "Oh, will you play with me?" So they're connecting now that they've put down their whole image and whatever the
They're
facade. Now
not
they're
they're not objects anymore.
right.
They saw each other as objects, and now they see each other as well. But this is a very elevated conversation we're having here, Mr.
Oh,
Alamo. I'm
oh, no.
really,
I mean, I
I
loved it. I
feel
mean,
like
just watching all this stuff had me, I thought, man, this is gonna be a great conversation. You were part of a Hamlet. What was it? Not Hamlet. Hamlet
Hamlet
and
Harlem. That is, you see, that is the project that I think that I'm trying to figure out how to move forward, because it's so before the pandemic, I wrote a screenplay which was an adaptation of Hamlet. It's an adaptation of an adaptation. It's a little funky. The whole story is that a few years ago, a dear friend of mine wrote a terrible Latino screenplay, and over dinner, I
are you
had
guys
to
still
explain
dear
to him,
friends after saying that?
Coño, I adore him. But here's the thing: I know for a fact that this is a really good guy, but he didn't know enough about Latinos.
Yeah.
And he wrote something that was so full of cliches that I had to sit with him and go like, "Dude, this is awful." And after that meeting, I'm like, "That was funny," having to sit down with this guy who has really good intentions and explain that he just fell into every cliche that he could find, and he did it with the best intentions. So I started exploring the idea of how can I turn that into something. And Hamlet in Harlem is the story of a white filmmaker who wants to do an all Latino adaptation of Hamlet, and it sucks. And while reading the script, the actors have to tell him that it sucks. And something very funny and very interesting comes out of that, including his own relationship with his father. So they tell you the story of Hamlet, kind of, but they also tell you the story of what happens to us every time somebody tells you, "So what do you think of The Undoing? Wasn't that great?" And you have to say, "No, it sucks." He had, two Latino characters. She was not even a Latina. They had to find an Italian actress to play that part. And he spends, 4 episodes or five, I don't know how long was the show, looking like he was going to kill you, and turned out that he was innocent. But for 5 episodes, you have the Latino who looks like he's going to cut you because you're looking at him the wrong way. I mean, the drama of still struggling to see the U.S. Latino population reflected on the TV screen. Man, is that ever going to end? What do you think?
That's what I thought about Abla. Was that like I can't imagine Abla coming out now, like especially the first renditions from like the late 2000s. I can't imagine it coming out now, because now we're more like when something's Latino, it has to be super Latino, and it has to be everybody, the prepackaged version of Latino. Whereas in those early versions of Abla, those early editions, I mean, you see Latinos who don't fit the Latino, the typical Latino box.
And that was the purpose. The purpose was to say, like, no, we can't fit into a box. You know that there's something. It's amazing how something that I saw in 1991 has haunted me through my entire life. I'll tell you in a second, because it has to do with those portraits that you liked,
Yeah.
that we haven't talked about, and I cannot tell you what they are. Okay, this is a little weird for those of you.
You cannot tell me what it is?
I cannot tell you yet, but I will at some point.
Okay.
So long story is that back in 1991, when I was working for MTV with the beautiful Daisy Fuentes. Oh,
Very
yes,
beautiful.
that was my first gig. I was so lucky.
I saw her in the celebrity one. And I had, I forgive me, Daisy. I forgot about her, but when I was a teenage boy in the 90s, Daisy Fuentes was it, man. She was it.
And I gotta tell you, she's so beautiful that even being gay, I would get like a little.
And her life story, you tell the life story, was amazing. I didn't know that about her. You think, she's just some hot piece of ass on MTV, but she had a really tough. She's a tough girl.
She grew up in New Jersey, Union City, Harrison, tough neighborhood, and she had to. The reason why I work with her is because she was from a generation that they were afraid of teaching Spanish to the kids because they would not they would speak with an accent, and then they would be discriminated against. it's what it was. So, but anyway, the so we went to Mexico for a production, and I had like 2 hours to visit Mexico because we were working. And in those 2 hours, I asked someone at the hotel what's open around here that I could see, like a museum, anything like that. And they sent me to this place called I think it's called El Convento de San Ildefonso, which is the school where like Frida Kahlo like did like her primary school or
Damn.
something. I know, but now it's a museum. And so I went in there, and they in one room they had like six little paintings, and they were always the same. It was like mom, dad, and a child, mom, dad, and a child. But the first one said white and Indian mestizo, and the father was white, the mother was Indian, and the baby was like a little dark. The next one said mestizo and black Zambo, and it was so I'm like, what? This is weird. And so it was this like racial catalog of like mixes. And in Venezuela, where I grew up, everybody's mixed. It's like, there are families where literally one brother is totally blonde and blue eyed, another brother is like black as charcoal. And they have exactly the same features, but the color is completely different because there's been so much
Right.
mestizaje.
Right.
So when I saw these little paintings, I'm like, this is weird. I've never seen this. There was no explanation for them. And recently, I went with my friend Fernando Ramirez, who's also my lawyer. We went to a museum in Madrid that had tons of those. They call them pintura de castas.
Mm.
And and then I realized that that's what they did in colonial times. Not because, oh, this is so cute. Let's describe our society. It's like, look at this because this is going to tell you where you fit in this
It's
world
like
and who
zoological.
exactly who's on top of who. And I got to tell you, man, we can't do that shit anymore.
Yeah.
We cannot go around making these little categories for ourselves. And I'm all about embracing your identity, whatever it is, complex as it may be, but don't make it about who is below and above. And
Right.
because that is what the colonial bullshit. That's how they took over America. I want to say they is fucked up that I happen to be born in Spain, but I'm certainly a convert.
Yeah.
Uh,
When one of the you have an old black, he looks like my grandpa. That's the other thing about the habla is that you have the whitest Latinos and then you have the blackest Latinos, and from all over. It doesn't matter what country, but you have a very, I'm gonna say a very black old man, but he's negrito negrito, and he says the most profound thing about race, right? Where he's like, when the way I was raised is that there's no such thing, the division between race and stuff is bullshit. You just you evaluate somebody by how they are and how they treat you, and that's it. I mean, that he says it so simply that he almost shames us into, still putting up with this racist society of ours.
Absolutely. And I tell you, I think we have to make an effort always, to be inclusive. But I'm also afraid of that. Every time we would have a screening of Habla, this was a joke between Trina Bardusco, producer, and I, because we'd say, somebody would show up and say, you didn't include any Afro-Colombians. We're like, oh shit, I'm sorry, man. We tried to bring everybody. Like, there are no Chileans in the show. I'm like, it shouldn't be, we shouldn't treat ourselves like a zoo, like a
Yeah.
little, a collection of tiles. Because what we share, ultimately, this is my profound theory, is what we all share as Latinos is tragically the experience of otherness,
Yeah.
of being excluded from the dominant culture, and that is only going to change if we stop feeling excluded.
Yeah.
And but we can't figure out exactly what it is that all Latinos have in common, but we see it and we notice it. At the Starbucks, we notice it. At the post office, we notice it when you and I are talking, that there's going to be some cultural thing that, has to do with my abuela, your abuela,
Yeah.
or it has to do with something that happens in the kitchen. Who knows? But what we do have for sure is the experience of being excluded.
I think there was a guy in Habla, Texas. He has a good theory. It's like, because we come up with all these superstitions. Even I'm an atheist now, but I know the la lechuza, I know all that stuff, right? And I don't believe in them, but in whatever you feared as a child, you can't really shake that fear even as an adult. It's still dormant, right? And he says, I think all those superstitions and all these things that your abuela or your mom said, don't do that, don't go. You can't, my grandma told my sister, it's not good for little girls to whistle because you're calling the devil. Stuff like that. Or don't sing in the morning because you're calling the devil if you sing in the morning. Shit like that, right? And he goes, yeah, that's all that shit that we have, that cultural, like we got to watch out for this. It gives us an edge. We have this like edge, just energy about us. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real honor to have you on.
Dude, I couldn't think of a more amazing way to spend a Friday afternoon in New York City than to talk to you. And what the hell are you doing in Vegas?
Well, my wife makes she's director of operations of this company that makes machine parts for slot machines, and it was my idea to move out here. Not coming out here, I miss the city life. I miss Chicago, man. I miss the food, and I miss the people. I miss the culture. There's no culture out here. So we probably
have characters, man. You must have the most fascinating characters in the universe.
Yeah, reading the newspaper every day is very entertaining.
I one of my most memorable. I mean, you can tell by the kind of stuff I write, but there was a casino called El Cortez.
It's still there.
It's still there.
It was owned by Frank Sinatra.
Because when I was there, they had not even painted the wall. I mean, it was the same wallpaper since the 60s. And all the waitresses were like in their 60s and they were in high heels and big sunglasses and wigs. It was just the most, you could play roulette for 10 cents. There was homeless people gambling. It was heaven. Yeah. Because everybody had a story. I was like, wow. But you were a little afraid for your life, which is not a bad thing,
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I'm being from Chicago. I'm a little too comfortable, especially where I live. I live in a pretty good area, and that's boring. That's boring. Just for your soul, you need to stand at a bus stop in January when it's freezing cold. You need to worry about. I don't worry about locking my doors at night. Nobody breaks into houses here, and you need that. You need to have this kind of dynamic relationship with the world, right?
Incertidumbre, as they call it in Latin America. Yes.
How do you say that?
Incertidumbre is the uncertainty. It's like, what?
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Let everyone know where they can find you on social media, where they can find your projects and all that stuff.
Okay. So if you stay with us for an hour, you must really like this guy. He's pretty amazing. Once again, my name is Alberto Ferreras. You can find me on Facebook, Alberto Ferreras. There's not too many of us. And on Instagram, Alberto Ferreras _NYC. And you're going to see, we never talk about the portraits, the black and white portraits of Latinos, but one of these days, we'll talk again when we can talk about it.
We got too much to talk about. So
too much. And you can watch Habla if you have HBO Max. I believe that all the episodes are back up. Yeah. And you can watch, if you want to see my short films, The Lessons, you can find them in YouTube. Just look up Alberto Ferreras, The Lessons.
Yeah, they're super short. I mean, none of them are more than 10 minutes. Some of them are even like 5-6 minutes, but they're super juicy. The lines, I mean, how long did it take you to write that script? I mean, you must have been going over lines over and over and over because it's so condensed, but it's so powerful.
I'm a little obsessive when it comes to writing. And then it took a little bit to make sure that the actor doesn't feel awkward with anything. Not a word can be out of place. I usually when I have the idea, it would take me maybe 4 days. From the moment that I have the idea, usually it's an idea that keeps bouncing in my head. Like I have an idea, for instance, with it's about 2 male hustlers who try to pick up each other in the bar without knowing they're both hustlers. So that is, from the moment that I come up with that idea to the moment that I finish the script, I'm going to say 4 or 5 days. But these are days that's all I do. I'm like, and I read it out loud. I'm all about reading out loud. That really helps when you write dialogue.
No, I mean, you're a brilliant writer. And watching Habla, I thought, are you considering having a podcast? Because I'm like, oh, this is kind of like, you kind of are kind of doing podcasts, but you're cutting different conversations together. But, you almost want to almost want to spend a whole hour with each of these people and hear their story.
it's not something that hasn't gone through my head. The thing, the curse is that my school was HBO Creative Services, which I was very, and now that I'm doing a couple of projects for HBO, it's like, wow, man, they're such perfectionists that I feel like to do a podcast, I have to, like, you have to be like Radiolab. Actually, I tried to do the Spanish version of Radiolab, but we'll talk about it in our next reincarnation.
Oh, for sure. I'm gonna have to have you back on real soon. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Hector Luis.
I'm gonna have to rewatch Habla. I'm gonna have to rewatch the lessons because it's so many things that 100 lines a minute.
I love that you would say that you would quote stuff from Habla and go like, wasn't that in Habla? Like, yes, exactly.
When I have all these people's faces and their stories and their voices in my head now, and it's beautiful.
When we did Habla Now, Diane Guerrero, she accepted to be in the show, and I was like, wow, because Diane is a big deal and she's amazing. I mean, she's a wonderful person. And when I walked into the makeup room, she was getting made up. She was like, the first time I saw myself on the screen was with Habla. My dream was to be in this show. I'm like, holy fuck. Number one, how old are we? But number two, who knew that something that we did in HBO, as an image campaign would inspire someone like Diane, who is not just an amazing actress, but she's a true organizer, leader. I mean, she's freaking amazing. Love
From
her.
Venezuela, right? From your native.
No, she's Colombian.
Colombian? Oh yeah.
Colombian. She talked about that mirror in her father's house, where she learned how to dance salsa. So she's a big salsa dancer.
I got to read her book. But that's a great way to put Habla, is that not only, she said she saw herself, but you see Latinos as they are, nothing contrived, nothing done up, Latinos as they are, and in their vast and beautiful diversity. And it's amazing. I don't know anything like it on TV. So congratulations. Well done. Bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good weekend, and cheers.
Cheers.
Take it easy.